So we start with our usual prayer for student and teacher. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily disagree with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So as I understand it, the first question was, just remind me, Jean, because there are about 4 or 5 questions there. So first question was?
Well, in no particular order, can you take on someone else's pain and suffering? And if you do, does that relieve them of the pain and suffering? And what is the difference between empathy, having empathy with someone's pain and actually taking on the pain and suffering? And then if someone can take on someone else's pain and suffering, every person will be reacting to it differently. So some people will be able to deal with that pain and suffering without it perhaps hurting them as much. And then the last one was regarding the knowledge to dispel the darkness.
So we have to bear in mind that there are at least 3 possible positions that we can view the world as, and ourselves in relation to that. We can view what we call the world as our environment outside ourselves. So we're familiar with that. I don't have to go into that in any great detail, because every day we wake up in the morning and we're faced with a world like that. And that world, of course, gives us a number of different pains and problems and difficulties. And the nature of the world is not to run smoothly. To run smoothly within the context of irregularity. I have to explain what that means. You see, if everything is symmetrical, then nothing will move, nothing will act. If everything was in equilibrium, there would be no such thing as any creative urge or movement or effect. So we have to take into account that there is, broadly speaking, in the human context and everything else we see, birth, life, and death. Not just birth and not just life. When a child is born, it's a singular event, everybody's happy and joyful. But for the parents and for those looking at the baby, it's an external event. For the baby, it's primarily an internal event. And then as the baby grows, the external world becomes bigger and bigger, and the necessity to react within itself becomes also commensurate with that. So this is a world that we can broadly describe as a duality, myself plus other things. And that is the world in which we live. Unfortunately, it doesn't do away with the question of pain that is inherently involved in life. Sooner or later, a child, even with a very, very happy childhood, will fall down at some point, will hurt themselves, maybe in some cases break a bone, and maybe in early childhood have febrile diseases, chicken pox, and so on. Febrile diseases, nature has arranged for children because adults find it very difficult to cope with them. But children are strong enough to cope with it. So we have to take the rough with the smooth. And then the question inherent in everybody's minds is, how long will this last? And despite my efforts to get on top of things and be happy, somehow life prevents me from doing it, and some difficulty or some kind of hurdle is in the way. And I, in some cases, don't know how to jump over it. Now, we have to develop something which is called faith. And faith is the opposite of fear. Fear is faith in our heredity, faith in our individuality. But the opposite of that is fearlessness. As faith means essentially there's no duality. Whenever there's a duality, there's a fear. Whenever there's more than one, then we have the opportunity or the possibility of fearing something and reacting to something. Is there such a thing as oneness? So the first step, the first way of understanding and reacting to the world is what we can call duality, myself plus others. And as long as I feel I am the body, that's how I behave, and that's what my world looks like, until I realize that maybe I'm a part of something bigger. Now, in spiritual life, the way we deal with these three positions is, as long as I feel I am the body, then I have a Lord of the universe, and I can surrender to that Lord, and I can cultivate an attitude of intensive love. It doesn't always begin like that. Sometimes it begins with a begging. Give me this, give me that. Try to get me out of a difficulty. If I'm in desperation and no human effort can get me out of it, then I look to a higher power. And then, of course, I'm okay, but I need my life to improve. I have enough money in the bank, but I would definitely like more. If I had more, I could do more. And then there's a prayer for knowledge. May I know more? But all that gives way ultimately as our knowledge grows, as our knowledge uncovers more and more and more, and as our feeling, for example, in devotional life increases, then we don't care about any of these things. We only care for seeking the beloved. And then we start an interior journey, and really at that point, religion as realization begins. It begins with an interior journey. Prior to that, religion was an external thing, with external rituals and movements. But now we want to discover the truth inside ourselves. And the nearer we get to that, we can understand that I am maybe not just a body, but I am a jiva, a soul, not attached to the body, and yet not attached or one with God either. And so there's this stage that I go through where I feel I'm a spark of something, a spark of the divine fire, or a drop in the ocean, or at least a wave in the ocean. Duality says, I'm a wave, I'm the only wave of any importance, and other waves are around me, and I have to bash against them or try and work around them in any way. In any event, I have to deal with them. No, I am a drop. I'm a drop and something vaster and still individual. And then ultimately a feeling of oneness. No, I am the ocean itself. So these are three steps, if you like, three stages, akin to climbing up to the roof of a building. And we start from the bottom, and then we go to the middle floor, and then finally we get to the top. And when we get to the top, we realize, all the bricks and the mortars and so on, everything was the same material. It's like saying you can't have gold and the ring. You have different identities and forms. Gold can be made into a bracelet or a necklace or a cup, but gold is gold. So there is name and form and substance. Our philosophy tells it like this, nama rupa, and the substance that we find is a monistic thing. There's nothing, no two separate. Now, when we look at every aspect, such as suffering, and look at it from an individual point of view, then we have to deal with it on an individual basis. But if we consider things are universal, then there's no such thing as somebody's suffering separate to somebody else's suffering. There's no difference between somebody's energy versus another person's energy. In Swami Vivekananda's commentary on the yoga aphorisms of Patanjali, contained in Raja Yoga, his first chapter on concentration, there's a wonderful statement he gives. He says, "We must remember the definition of this world of ours. It is only the infinite existence projected into the plane of consciousness." What a beautiful statement. A little of the infinite is projected into consciousness, and that we call our world. So there is an infinite beyond. And religion has to deal with both of these things. It has to deal with the little lump we call our world, and also with the infinite beyond. And any religion which deals with only one of these two will be defective. It must deal with both. The part of religion which deals with the part of the infinite which has come into the plane of consciousness got itself caught, as it were, in the plane of consciousness, in the cage of time, space, and causation. This is quite familiar to us because we are in that already. And ideas about this world have been with us almost from time immemorial. The part of religion which deals with the infinite beyond comes entirely new to us. And getting ideas about it produces new channels in the brain. This is way, way before the discovery of what is called neuroplasticity, that we can make new channels, new grooves in the brain by exercising the brain in different, creative, unique ways. Just to remind you, London taxi drivers were given new routes to memorize. And then when they examined the neurology of the brains, they discovered that new avenues, as it were, roadways, pathways, new electrical connections had been made. And the science of this development, this flexibility with the brain, was called neuroplasticity. It was a great discovery. It encourages people, as they get older, to take up new hobbies and interests, always to keep the mind occupied, always to find something new to learn every day. And so he tells us this. So when we get these new channels in the brain, it is disturbing the whole system. That is why you find in the practice of yoga, that is this Raja Yoga, this yoga of meditation or concentration, ordinary people are at first turned out of their grooves. In order to lessen these disturbances as much as possible, all these methods are devised. Now, there are different areas of discomfort. Of course, physical discomfort is there. But physical discomfort is only the final manifested outpouring of a psychological difficulty, and that in its turn is an outpouring of a single entity. There is only one cosmic mind. There is only one energy. There is only one matter, according to the yogis. Now, not just according to the yogis, but according to modern science. We take the highest generalizations of everything, and from there we understand what everything else is made of. Instead of analyzing and capturing every single atom in the universe, every single atomic particle, a simple sample of it is made. It is made to surge, or two particles are made to surge in opposite directions in chambers underground in a huge, huge laboratory experiment, the Large Hadron Collider, and smashing these particles or subatomic particles is designed to see what the fallout is and see if there are any more fundamental particles that we can put on our register. So they don't have to collect every single atom of the universe to discover this. There is inherently a generalized principle. You discovered it in one place, you've discovered it everywhere. The great scientist Albert Einstein knew this, and he developed the general relativity theory, the theory that can be applied everywhere on the basis that I've experienced it locally, and I'm applying it in every single case to every single part of the universe. So we often forget, really, this oneness. And when we talk about somebody's sufferings, we're really talking in dualistic language. But you see, somebody who understands the oneness is prepared out of compassion on the dualistic level, on that level where compassion is required. Because if that person loves the other, and there are very rare people like this, loves them so much, will they allow them to suffer? This is behind the theology of Christ on the cross. In that case, one person decides, let me be the sacrificial lamb. Let me be the thing that will take all the sins. Now, sins is Abrahamic language for karma. Let me take all the effects of somebody's actions, which are deleterious to that person. Why would you want to suffer? Let me suffer as much as I can. But you see, some suffering is required. This is called prarabdha karma. The effects of ongoing karma we have to live out in our life. But as much as possible, let me take the suffering. And this requires empathy. Now, what is the difference between empathy and sympathy? I feel sorry for you, but you stay away from me. Your cold is your own. You keep your flu, please, and keep your mask on, and give me some social distancing, and that's fine. And I'll hear about all your suffering, how all your joints were aching, but I don't want that, thank you. That's one way. But then the other way is for somebody to say, I see no difference between you and me at the end of the day, and I can easily take this. There's a magnetic field, I don't know where the end of it is. But since there is only one thing, and since there is only one cosmic mind, let the localized area, which we call I am paining, come to me. And that is done with a certain knowledge to say that supposing I believe that there are millions and millions and millions of lives, then can I not sacrifice one for you? Because you see, that would be true love. That would be true empathy, as opposed to sympathy. Empathy means I feel what you're feeling, and I go one step further. Not only do I feel what you're feeling, but I want to feel exactly what you're feeling. And in that, I am happy to take that, to make a transfer of those waves that you're calling pain waves onto this localized thing. And maybe I'm more able to deal with it. Maybe the person who does that is more able to deal with it. Because maybe they're not inviting pain on themselves necessarily. Maybe they're all happy and content. Much of the pain, physical pain that we get, is because of mental stress, anxiety. In fact, proportionately, some say even 90% of all disease is caused by mental malfunctioning, as it were. Some aberration in the mind that creates fear, anxiety, doubt, and dissatisfaction because the things we want are not being obtained. All these are factors. Right now, or even before now, there was a great deal of anxiety to do with COVID. Whole nations were in the grip of concern, fear, anxiety. And that had a telling effect on the human body, because every cell of the body will take every thought that you issue. You know that. As soon as you think of some thought which is uppermost in your mind to do with the senses, let us say, for example, let us say food. You briefly imagine this is your last day. You know, when somebody goes on the death row, they give that person a last meal. I have no idea why. What use is it? Anyway, let them enjoy it for the last time. So if you had a last meal, what would it be? Now visualize it. It won't be long before saliva starts flowing in your mouth and gastric juice starts flowing in your stomach. All you have to do is watch your favorite food being cooked on a YouTube program or something like that, and it won't be long before you'll want to eat exactly that. So every cell of the body really is a duplication in myriad forms of the total person that you are, and within its nucleus is DNA, all the future possibilities in architectural form that you have been, that you are, that you will ever be, and that has to be unfolded. That is your full potential. So, what is the most compassionate thing that a person can do for another? It is to give them the possibility of accessing their own freedom. That is why here as a Vedanta society, we are doing the most charitable work, more than drug rehabilitation, more than education, more than any other thing, because we're saying, look, you have the possibility of removing all your difficulties and pain. And you have the possibility of doing it now. And let's see how you do it. And I'm not saying that we are proud, that we are egotistic enough to say that we ourselves will free you. No. But we can suggest, these are your obstacles. This is how to remove them. But then the next thing is, it's up to you. You'll have to do the work on it. If you don't do the work, no matter what I do, it won't happen. But supposing that a person who knows the unity of existence, supposing such a person becomes an open channel for divine grace to flow everywhere, and blesses and transforms everybody wherever they go. This is one dimension of it. But the other dimension is, if there's compassion for another, if there's empathy, that means not only do I tread in your shoes and understand your pain, pain being a useful thing, because how can I know your pain if I myself have not experienced it? And then to go one step further and say, so let me take it from you. And then you see whether the divine arrangement will do that. In the meantime, will you simply suffer for the sake of suffering? No. What you'll do is you'll maintain your alignment, your attunement to the glory of the self or God. That means you are always stress-free. That means there is no anxiety in you. That means you are a person of steady wisdom. That means that you have an equilibrium of mind. And that means that whatever pain comes to you, you'll still be even-minded, uncomplaining. You'll take it, knowing that it will also go. And just what will happen, therefore, in the localized area of this ocean, the transfer of that wave that we call pain can be transferred to another localized area. And so it moves on like a flowing river, with no particular part ever being the same. So do we have some examples of that? Over breakfast this morning, I was discussing the great saint that is so popular in Ireland amongst the Roman Catholics. Who is it? Who is the most popular saint here? Leave St. Patrick alone.
Bridget?
Padre Pio. Padre Pio, yes. Now it is said in his life, in his biography, that when people went into the confessional, they were there for a long time, because what was happening was this great saint was giving counseling and was also taking, the description is, Abrahamic description, was taking their sins from them. It means was taking the karma, was taking the effects of their activities on him. And so he was quite prepared to suffer. And we are told by some people who knew him that he had the habit of making everybody joyful. getting people to laugh. This is very different from the sackcloth and ashes concept that we have of a great mystic or saint. And just remind you, as I have so many times before, how Swami Vivekananda said that if you see somebody with his face down by his knees, it is not spirituality, more than likely it's dyspepsia. So it is the joy that that person carries. So there's a beaming and a transforming. And empathy has a natural consequence. It means, if I truly love you, I don't want you to suffer. If I don't want you to suffer, what will I do? Try to make some corrections in your life so that you don't have to suffer so much. And secondly, if I can, let me take it on me so that you have a better opportunity to do what? Not to squander your renewed energy, but to get your freedom so that you can do your spiritual practices better. Because as we know, if you have a physical difficulty, let us say arthritis on your left knee, then when you sit for meditation, no doubt you'll be meditating profoundly on arthritis. You'll be always conscious of the pain. And so we have to be physically fit for our spiritual life. We have to be mentally fit, and the two act on each other. If I'm not physically well, then the mind becomes less happy, less joyful, becomes more miserable. So is it possible? Why is it possible? Yes, it's possible, and that's the reason why it's possible. Because a person who is in that frame of mind is always attuned to the cosmic mind, and the cosmic mind is everything. The cosmic mind is the author of life. The cosmic mind is the creator. The cosmic mind is the preserver. And the cosmic mind is the dissolver also. The cosmic mind is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The cosmic mind is all there is. A person who is tuned into that cosmic mind that religion calls God will be, in a sense, all-powerful, be able to remove another's sufferings. And if they have sufficient compassion, say, where will I take these? Like taking items, from a shopping basket and saying, where will I put them? Oh, okay, let me put them in my storehouse for the time being. So that is the principle behind it. And every person like that will be somebody of compassion. The supreme examples of that will be what we call avatars. And these avatars will always sacrifice their own lives for others. Avatara means that entity, that being that comes down, that descends. So we have examples: Ramakrishna, Christ, Jesus, as I say, Buddha, Krishna, Rama, etc. All of these self-sacrificing people, because they're embodiment of love. Now, of course, there may be some discernment in this, because at the end of the day, the final entity that has the say in this is the wise cosmic mind, which acts as a balancing power also, and which will decide, as it were, whether you should continue having the pain or not, because pain is an educator. Without pain, we won't learn anything. There's every reason why the Bhagavad Gita begins with pain. It begins with Arjun's depression. Not just depression. He was having a nervous breakdown, a complete meltdown. How do we know that? We know that because all the symptoms are there, and the symptoms are clearly put out in Patanjali Yoga Sutras too. That somebody who lacks concentration, which is what it is, somebody who lacks a balanced mind, a well-controlled mind, what will be the symptoms of this? There will be tears, there will be grief, there will be shaking, there'll be tremors, there'll be irregular breathing. Many of these symptoms we can notice in connection with anxiety. We can relieve some of these symptoms, irregular breathing, for example, by cultivating regular breathing. Yes, that's possible as a temporary interim solution. But the final solution is concentration. Concentration on what? on any subject that is elevating, any subject that leads you ultimately to the sense of your own freedom. And so I mentioned that we are doing the most charitable work. Why? Because we are giving people the access tools and the principles to access your own freedom. The second most important and charitable thing that you can do would be to give somebody an education in every sense. And then the third one, that is, teach people to be self-reliant. And the third one then would be to uplift anybody in a suffering condition, anyone who's poor and distressed and so on. And fourthly, all of these are good. And fourthly, save a life. Why fourthly? Why is that last? Society today puts it first. It's because what is a mere life? It's a flash in the pan and will continue to be a flash in the pan. But it's not a full stop, it's a comma. There'll be a continuation. Part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, scene 3, scene 4, scene 5. And all of this adventure, it may be thousands and millions of lives. But at least a little bit of step-by-step progress is important and indeed necessary. We can't get the whole thing in one go. Then all of this then depends on accessing your knowledge. In other words, removing your ignorance, because these are two sides of the same coin. When you remove your ignorance, your knowledge gets revealed. It's not an increase, it's a revelation. And so this knowledge, this ignorance, is the primary klesha or obstacle that we have in terms of this revelation of knowledge of our own nature, of the actual truth and reality. Now, this is why we deal with personality development courses. This is why we want you to understand what is the ego, your own independent self-image, your own version of your mechanism, your internal script, your sense of embodiment, your attachment to a body-mind complex, to essentially a mask. And instead of acknowledging it as mask, you say, I am the mask and I am everything attached to the mask. And so this is the importance of the course that we give as a primary thing, because you have to make sure that you're able to handle this. It's a primary obstacle. And from that obstacle will come all the things, all the pain, all the pleasure, the attachment, the desire, the fear, the pull in one direction and the pull away from another direction, this duality that we're living in, a constant struggle between what is pleasurable and what is to be avoided, what we don't like, what we don't like. So there has to be some stability for that. And the stability comes from a gradual realization. What helps in this realization? You're already having this help. You wouldn't be attending this question answer session if you weren't interested in knowing what is the help. In knowing firstly the principles. And the principle is very clear. I'll just remind you again what Swami Vivekananda says. I'll read it again. We must remember, he says, the definition of this world of ours. It is only the infinite existence projected into the plane of consciousness. This is such a profound statement. We could meditate on this for hours and hours together. Now, when we forget this is called ignorance. And so we have to continuously remind ourselves by bringing the mind back to the central truth, not only as a principle, but more importantly, as a practice. We have to feel it. The emotions have to be rallied around. Now, for most people, this takes the form of a direct relationship with a personal God, a personal form of God. In other words, a direct tuning in to the cosmic mind. That embodiment of love and compassion, that embodiment of knowledge and light, that embodiment of existence and creation, that entity we can tune into. And the more we tune into that by various means, by taking on a guru, by following the guru's instructions, by doing what we call japa, by reading scriptural texts, by acts of compassion, by meditation and prayer, by all of these means. When these things get refined, habitual, and intensified on a daily basis, until a small opening happens within us that becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, until it becomes huge, until it becomes everything. Don't think that we'll get it in a moment. If you get it in a moment, it's not worthwhile. Let it happen gradually, let it happen progressively, but let it happen. And take on 1,000 tools that are available for you to do this. Whatever is useful to you, you take it on. So I hope I've answered your question. I'm not sure, because there are 4 or 5 questions within that.
Yes, Swamiji, thank you so much. I obviously will listen to this again and reflect on it, because there is a wealth of information and practical information in that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome. You see, if you take somebody's sufferings on, there's an element, there's a whole, not just an element, there's a faith in it and a fearlessness in it. It cannot harm me because I'm aligned and attuned to the cosmic protector. So with a strength and boldness, you say, I'll take it. It's like going up a mountain and somebody has a pack on their back, and they're a little thin and they didn't have breakfast in the morning and they're struggling. You say, let me take it. You being stronger, you can take it. Why not? When the person gets a little stronger, don't worry, another pack will come. That's the nature of nature itself. All right. I think you had a question.
Yeah. Taking on somebody else's burden, and I understand what you just said there. You qualified it by saying, well, you take on the burden for now because you're the stronger person. Obviously, the danger is that you take that burden and never shed it, and you carry it for them. And I'm talking about a mother for a daughter, a brother for a sister, a father for a son, where you have chosen willingly to take the burden, but the danger of almost doing it for them, or the danger of guiding them. There's a dichotomy there that just hit me slap bang in the face. Help me with that, please.
Well, firstly, I feel very sorry for your face.
I knew you were going to say that.
I don't quite see the dichotomy.
So taking on somebody else's, so back to Jean's question, it's a very good question. Taking on somebody else's pain, or taking on somebody else's satchel, is the danger that you end up doing, you take that to its nth degree and you end up doing something for them rather than just taking it on spiritually. You take it on physically. It manifests itself in your daily activity. It's you then taking responsibility for that scenario.
Oh yes, why not?
Because then you're living their life for them. You're doing
not at all. No. So you're climbing up the mountain. Somebody's struggling. You take their pack for them.
Metaphorically speaking, somebody has a challenge in their life with their relationships, with their career, with their whatever, and you decide, I'll carry those packs for you.
Yeah, no, that's their business. Yeah. No, I don't want to get involved in their domestic issues, but their suffering, certainly. And the suffering always manifests as physical suffering. Mental suffering will always manifest as physical suffering. You can't get away from it. You see, the way we view the body is not just a single item. It's a series of layers, if you will. And one layer is the causal factor for the following layer. So that if the mind is disturbed, and you consider the mind to be something like a layer, it will definitely pass itself on to the physical. There's no doubt about that. In fact, most of the world's diseases will be like that. So if you take on their mental and if you take on their physical sufferings, you're taking on the ultimate effect and relieving them of that burden. But there will be other burdens that they'll get, of course, as time goes on. You can't avoid it completely. You can't completely take somebody's burdens away.
Okay.
You see, if you take and I'm saying it's the extreme case because these are avatars. Avatars are there, they're saying, not just one or two people, let me take on the burden for the whole of humanity. That's the theology behind Jesus' crucifixion. Let me die for the sins of all men, not just the Lutherans. Of course, the Lutherans think that Christ was a Lutheran. He wasn't. They weren't even Lutherans when he was around, never mind. You see, it wasn't just for a select group of people. It was for the whole of humanity. That's the theology behind it. Now, Ramakrishna self, he had a cancer of the throat. It was the same thing. For the whole of suffering humanity, let me take this on. Teaching day and night, initially getting what we call clergyman's throat, and ultimately getting cancer. And his disciples said, can't you please ask, since you're so close to God, and in this case in the form of mother, can't you ask for our sake? Can't you ask her that, to cure yourself, or at least to enable you to swallow food? And he had a mode of a child. So he went into his meditation, to his ecstatic state, and came back, wagging his finger. Oh, rascal. Actually, the mother said, why do you worry about this mouth when you're feeding through all these other mouths? You see, this is how you elevate things to the position of non-dualism. All these mouths, all these limbs only belong to one cosmic entity. A person who has that state of mind will not view it in the way that these questions are framed. Now, we are not a Ramakrishna, we're not a Jesus. But nevertheless, we can uphold that as a model of compassion. And we can say, oh, so what happens in initiation, in Diksha, the Guru does make a contract and says, let me take your burdens from you. So the result of your behavior, I will take. That means it's incumbent on the student to behave well and to only think the purest thoughts and only behave in the purest way. And likewise, the student takes on the compassion and the goodness of the Guru. The grace of the Guru, really God's grace flowing through an entity that has made the ego an open channel for divine grace to flow. Then you'll feel that flow of grace everywhere. So that's what is being given. But then the compassion means, okay, you're now my child, let you not suffer. I can take it on. If you're climbing up the mountain and your 5-year-old child, you give the heaviest pack to, will you just leave it and say, good luck?
No, I mean, I completely understand it. I get it. I wish I did it every day. There are moments.
No. You see, you don't have to do it, but you see, as love and compassion grows, it becomes a natural state, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. But this is the difference between empathy and sympathy. Yes, very, very sorry. Keep your distance. You see, we can't be truly like that everywhere because we don't know. We don't know about refugees in this world today. We in first world countries, we're sitting and we think we're fine because we have a roof over our head, we have food to eat, we have shoes. I have safety shoes. We have all kinds of comforts and what have you. We have clothing. When the weather is poor, we have an umbrella, a raincoat, and so on. It is only if you have been through what somebody else has been through that real empathy starts coming. Real empathy and compassion starts coming on the human level. But we have to be sure not to leave it there. And we have to have a penetrating vision that yields to adoration. Now, in a state of adoration, this now gives you the extra dimension to say, Lord, I will carry this for you. You see, like Simon of Cyrene, is it, who carried Jesus' cross? Let me take it for you. So all we're asked in our daily life is to increase our level of empathy that results in compassion, and go further, make a penetrating vision to say, "Ah, Lord, there you are, dressed up in this way, in this form."
Swami, I had a question.
Okay.
Accepting praise, receiving praise for things and achievements and talents, which is all God's grace. How do you receive that without, because it's sort of like can feel strange when somebody compliments you and then you feel, well, it's not really me. It's not me. But you don't want to reject the compliment. It's just a strange thing that I'm experiencing lately where I feel it's everything, it's God's grace. But then when people compliment, it's a strange, you know what I mean? I want to just say, oh, no. It's not. You, and I've heard you speak like that at times as well, you know. But yeah, how do you?
Well, firstly, you have to be truthful. So let's explore this idea of truthfulness. You see, we grow up in a culture where we feel it's bad to say something good about ourselves. We think that that's a lack of humility. We think that it is pride. So when we weigh up, and people who, particularly people who have a low sense of self-esteem, you ask them, can you tell me 3 things you like about yourself? Can you tell me 3 things that are your skills or your talents or your abilities? And they'll struggle. So we have to look at it this way. We have a purpose in life. All of us have the same purpose, that is to realize the goal of perfection. But we have another purpose, an individual purpose, something that is individual. And remember, all the time I say, look at your fingerprints, assess the fact that you have an individual DNA. It means there's something you can do that nobody else has done, nobody is doing now, nobody can ever do in the future, in terms of an assemblage of your total talents and abilities. It's like, what is my identity? Well, Swami Purnananda for passport purposes. What is my identity in meditation, in prayer? Oh, Lord, I'm your child. What is my identity in deepest meditation? There's no identity whatsoever. So you see, there's a shifting landscape that enables us to play the game in the situation we find ourselves. And if somebody compliments you, yes, what beautiful talents and abilities and so on, you have to honestly say, yes, these are. And you might say, I, for passport purposes. But as long as internally you're understanding, actually, these are all borrowed talents. These are all distributions of manifested divine grace arriving at my station in order to exhibit them, in order to express these. in the context of the overall how they fit, in the world and how they contribute to the overall good. Because the skills and talents you have are not in isolation. They're there because they fit into the overall scheme of things, the overall jigsaw puzzle, the rhythm of the universe and the rhythm of the world in which we live is only there because we are doing what we should be doing. And this, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls this svatdharma, your own individual duty, what you are required to do. And you can't do something if you haven't got the tools to do it. You're given the tools. And not everybody should have the same tools or should have the same gifts. They're all gifts, no doubt. They're all gifts. So yes, you have gifts, but somebody else also has gifts. Everybody has gifts, and these happen to be yours. So this is the truthful position. When we do a balance in terms of virtues and vices, we will find out that by and large, we have more on the virtue side than on the vices side. So be truthful and honest with yourself and acknowledge, yes, on this passport level, my identity is this, and I have these talents and abilities. Behind it, yes, but I know that all of these are manifestations. So you might say graciously, yes, thank you so much. And you might even spot their individual talents and abilities without appearing to be smarmy and say yes. And I think you also have these talents and abilities, by the way. But internally, what are you thinking? Lord, thank you for these talents and abilities to arrive at this station for me and others to enjoy for the good of all. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. It's lovely.
All right, so we have another 5 minutes and then we are finished on this. So any other questions or comments? If there's nothing else, we wish you a good evening. So, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you.
Thanks, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swami.
All right, good.
Merci beaucoup, Swami.
Ah, merci beaucoup. Bonne soirée.
Merci,
Thank you,
vous
Swami.
aussi.
We're all good.